Emily on the scene. ABCs of ERP and beyond. ABCs of ERP and beyond. From shop floor rising up to the top. Real talk, no hype, now the buzz won't stop. ABCs of ERP and beyond.
And welcome back to the ABCs of ERP and Beyond, the show that looks at ERP from 3 different seats. Most ERP advice tends to come from one chair, and it's normally the partner who sold it, or sometimes the end user that's stuck with it. Well, we try and triangulate that. We have Nirav Shah. He gives us the partner view. He's at AdSerious ERP and, well, implements this for a living. I come from the nerdy data and systems side inside a business that runs an ERP day to day. And we have Emily Browning, who keeps us honest on business process and project management, the people, the workflows, and the systems that are actually meant to serve those people. Now, we are 80 odd episodes into the ABCs of ERP and Beyond, and almost every single one has pointed in the same direction, and that's upwards. Outgrow those spreadsheets, upgrade your systems, migrate to the cloud, choose your first ERP. Well, today we are looking the other way and asking the question that doesn't often get asked, and that's, should you downgrade? Tier 1 ERP costs you the same whether you use all of it or even a third of it, but the value only tones up if you go deep and if your master data is in decent shape. Are you leveraging your tier 1, or do you actually need to step down onto a tier 2 ERP? So today we are going to be discussing that, some of the signs that maybe that's the right move for you. So as ever, let's get straight into it. Welcome both.
Hello.
Thank you.
This is an interesting subject. We've always said about moving from your piles of Excel and piles of physical paper and getting rid of QuickBooks, and look at ERP. Look at this cool upgrade to your business. Now we're looking at it the other way around, because I'm sure there will be people that are on this kind of legacy tier 1 ERP, this massive gargantuan thing that's costing them a lot of money, both in licensing every year, but also massive support costs each year to continue to operate on such a huge system that actually they don't need. We say this lots of times. We always say, well, you don't do this that often, these kind of ERP projects. 15 years worth of ERP improvements is great. Move on to an ERP, but it's just as much the other way around, isn't it? It's 15 years of being stuck on this huge one. Look at what these smaller ERP can actually now do for you. Look the other way if you're already on an ERP system. And what do we think about that for an episode today?
Well, I recall Nirav first suggesting this few months ago now, and I remember thinking, yeah, it is quite good, but I've never encountered it. I don't know how common it is. But since then, trade shows, industry knowledge and networking, I've learned that this is actually quite a big topic at the moment. It's coming up for lots of customers, lots of implementation partners. So I think this is a really valuable topic to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, it's a kind of growing epidemic, if you will, in the ERP space, where these tier 1 solutions have sold their product and, at that time was probably the best choice, right? When you look at functionality requirements such as multi-language, being able to see across companies and inventory, multiple taxation methodologies in a single instance, like those were real problems, probably, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But as technology advances, as software advances, and we're able to pack more power in smaller solutions, I think, companies are now scratching their heads saying, hey, we are spending, $100,000 a month on this software, and maybe they're paying a maintenance. Remember the old way of you buy the software, which was a minimum of $125,000 or $250,000, and then you pay a 20% enhancement, which is let's say $25,000, $40,000. And when you're looking at SAP, you're looking at these bigger tier 1 solutions back in the day. That enhancement's probably well over $100,000 per year that they're paying, and you kind of have to sit back and look at, all this marketing out there for software and these tier 2 solutions and what they're able to do, how much more flexible they are, in its functionality. And, companies are starting to realize what we have now was the Ferrari, right? Back in the day, 20 years ago, But now, some of the features in that Ferrari probably don't exist. I need actually power windows. I don't need manual windows anymore. So, it's still a Ferrari. It still could do your main functionality, right? The power is still there from a horsepower perspective, but there's certain features and functionality that just, you're like, well, I need to upgrade this part of my business now because it just runs more efficiently. And I know there's other systems that do it. So it's a growing problem. A lot of companies are looking at this as how do we get into a tool that everybody will enjoy using, that's AI driven, that has power in certain areas where their current software doesn't have power in. So they're all questioning this. They're all questioning it. These tier one customers that implemented 15, 20, 30 years ago are questioning whether they still need to be on that path forward.
What are some of the reasons why there may be a business out there that needs to downgrade? Now, I'm going to continue to use downgrade because I think we should call it out as it is. It's not downgrade in terms of less features and stuff, but there's so much marketing out there that blurs this type of project where they call it a realignment or a reassessment or right sizing, fit reassessment. We want to make sure that we're focused on there's a reason we need a smaller ERP. So I'm going to be contrarian and just continue to say downgrade. Because I want to make sure we're doing this not because we want to move on to a newer one, and it just so happens the newer one is smaller. We're actually wanting to move on to a smaller one. That is the purpose of that. So with that line of thinking, one that I want to probably start with, because I think, Nirav, you mentioned it a few episodes ago, around just being sold something too big. They overbought, right? They had a flashy tier one vendor turns up, great team, took them out for a nicer, fancier meal at a nicer restaurant. And ultimately, I think you said that you had someone that actually they could have just gone with BC. So let's talk about that overbuying.
I mean, I've seen, like I said, that example. There was a customer that got sold F&O SCM, and it was 5 users. 5 users using F&O SCM, like literally. I don't know if they were on a time crunch or didn't really ask the right questions and they jumped into it. Implementation took over a year for 5 users. Like that's to me, you're way oversold, right? Software at that point. Something like Business Central could have done the job easily. A tier 2 solution could have done it easily. So sometimes these customers don't know what they don't know. They rely on friends of a friend. Right? Your friend that has a business, you have a business and your friend saying, hey, look, I just got an F&O. You should really look at it. But that doesn't easily correlate. Maybe that person who gave you the recommendation has 100 people, has 200 people, right? Is maybe $1 billion organization. And you that's looking for an ERP software, maybe you're $5 million, right? It doesn't equate that way. So, that's one thing. And the other thing is when you're downgrading, if we're calling that right now, right? We're calling it downgrading. It could be that you went from full manufacturing to becoming more of a distributor because you outsourced your manufacturing. You no longer do it in-house anymore, right? Maybe you did that at some point. You had machines. You actually produced a finished good. And now you found a cheaper resource in China and decided to outsource the whole thing. And you just buy raw materials. It goes straight to the supplier. They produce it. You bring it back in-house to do the distribution, warehousing distribution. So yeah, why use those manufacturing modules? Why pay for those manufacturing modules if you're no longer going to use it, right? So those are, kind of quintessential, I guess, ways where you could see this, kind of your current ERP being a big overhead on your balance sheet, your P&L, and where you need to maybe cut that down a little bit to keep it more realistic to what you're doing now.
I can completely see how it happens because often the people making these decisions are not us, the people in our roles in the business. It could be controller, it could be your operations manager. That person's job is not to know ERP very well. So I can absolutely see how it seems like a solid and safe choice to go for a big name. Maybe you don't know everything about it, but you're safe with that ERP. And to a point, that's true. We're just talking about the way in which it's been oversold. And I think costs as well can be crazy. Even if this was a decision, from back in the days of perpetual licenses, the support and access to upgrades can be absolutely crazy. So you still have to pay for support. And within that, that's usually where you get your access to your upgrades, patches, things like that. And even if you say, well, you know what, we don't see ourselves upgrading in the next 5 years, so why do we need to keep paying that? Well, because in 5 years, when you do decide to upgrade, you're going to have to pay the backlog of 5 years that you didn't pay for. So whatever happens, you're going to have to pay that. And often we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is a lot. It is a lot, and there are cheaper options that are really, really good options as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add to this is the ecosystem, the ERP ecosystem is very deep now. There's industry specific ERPs. There's, right, like we're talking about tier 1 is, I feel like, getting a new publisher every other week. Tier 2 is getting a new publisher every other week. There's a lot more to choose from, I think, than there was before. So I think that is also probably one of the main drivers too, because there's more options for customers now when they're looking for ERP systems than what there was 20, 30 years ago. So to have that conversation of, do we need to be on what we're on now? Can we move down or maybe de-scope, right? Maybe instead of downgrade, de-scoping, move that down an ERP system that's a little bit more manageable, a little bit more cost-effective for my business, and go that route.
I was doing some research before starting when we were talking about categorization of ERP, and I stumbled across the Panorama Consulting Group's yearly ERP thing they put together, right? The ERP report.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting the way they've done it this year. It's slightly different from previous years, but they do call out quite early on kind of splits between tier 1, and then they have upper tier 2 and lower tier 2. So I'm going to just call out if people don't know what we mean when we're talking about what do they mean tier 1, tier 2? Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, tier 1 here, it says systems designed for enterprises more than 750 million in annual revenue. Remember, take that with a pinch of salt. There's multiple things that can need to be factored into that. Most enterprises of these size are complex, either due to complex operational processes or complexity in their entity structure and consolidation needs. Tier 1 applications address multiple industries and scalability. Examples: SAP S4HANA, Oracle Fusion Cloud, Infor Cloud Suite. The big one. Upper tier 2, they are categorizing these as systems typically serving small to mid-size operations between 250 to 750 million revenue annually. Organizations of this size may encompass multiple industries and multiple business units. Examples: IFS Cloud, Sage X3, Epic or Kinetic, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance. Lower tier 2, small to mid-size again, but 10 to 250 million. These ones tend to be one industry, typically, single entity to manage. That's where we find NetSuite, SysPro, Acumatica, those kind of. So that's what we kind of mean by tier 1 and tier 2. So I think that's quite a useful separation when we talk about tier 1 and tier 2. Now, what do you think about that?
I think I agree with the list. I think the list is spot on. However, I think the third-party ISV market shakes that up. Like you could have, Acumatica as being the mid-tier 2, and let's say you need multi-entity functionality, and that's the reason why there's IFS out there, right? Or you have Epicor. Well, there's a really good third-party solution in the Acumatica ecosystem for multi-entity. If that's the only thing you need, and that's a big part of the project, but the rest of Acumatica is actually good for you out of the box, then why bother looking at that tier 1, right? That's where there was a big gap in the past, where this robust kind of third-party marketplace didn't exist. And now, since it does, I would challenge folks out there to find a mid-tier 2 solution that can't kind of do almost like 90%, 95% of what tier 1 could do, but add the proper third-party ISVs you need to make that comparison. And I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to realize, the mid-tier 2 is a good place to land.
Mic drop. I think that kind of sums it up. That's that for me is the biggest point, absolutely the biggest point, because otherwise, and we're talking about fit here, right? How much of what you're paying are you actually using? And that's exactly it. It's like, Acumatica. Now we can't do that because it doesn't do this one thing. Well, there's going to be an ISV out there that can. Instead of going, now we need, one of these tier 1 SAP solutions because it has this one thing. it also has 17 other things that we're going to pay for that we're not going to use because we don't need that.
Right.
And I think also the flexibility that you get with something like Acumatica, it's so much easier, isn't it, to custom than it is to find out 6 months down the line that you need to do a customization to SAP. That's going to be months, lots of money compared to Acumatica, which is going to be simpler. You've got more flexibility. It's going to be quicker to implement. I don't think a lot of companies would think about that. They would just go to acumatica.com, look at the list of features. It doesn't have that. Another Google search. SAP has it.
Right.
I don't think it's missing that much. On your list, also for me, that was the one that jumped out where I thought, does it belong? Does it belong there? It definitely can handle the complexities that we're talking about at that sort of upper tier 2. But from what we've said so far, it kind of sounds a little bit like, okay, if you buy Acumatica and also these 5 third-party add-ons, then it will work. And that's not the case, actually. I think maybe you would need 1 or 2, depending on what level of complexity that you were going for. But while, yes, it's relevant, it's not that it doesn't have all the basics there already. It just may be that you need an area to work to be a bit deeper, a bit more complex, but certainly not tons of third-party add-ons just to get it working.
Yeah, I would also say if you're in that first ERP 20, 30 years, right, and you're looking for the next one, we did an episode on this, right, how your second ERP migration is going to be easier than the first. Look at a tier 2. Don't just look at a tier 1 because you're coming off of a tier 1, right? There's a lot of value in the tier 2 market space with ISV solutions that could fit all the needs that you had with your tier 1 ERP and give you more, plus more, right? So, if you're in that kind of phase of the business decision-making process where you're looking for your next ERP, look at exactly how much of your current ERP you're using. I think, Peter, you said that rightfully, right? Look at what you're using. If you're not using it all, kind of write that down, jot that down, right? What modules you're using, which modules you're not using right now. Where'd you do customizations? You probably have some customizations in your current ERP system. What type of customizations have you done? Which ones are you still using? Which ones are you not using? Which customizations? So I think that first step of really analyzing your current ERP, tier 1 ERP, and then going down the research path and finding the tier 2 ERP that will be a close similarity to that tier 1, but then also which third-party solutions you could add on to round it off to make it a complete product might be the right way to go. Right, you save cost. You actually use more of the software instead of less of the software, and might be easier to use for your users. Right, there might be a lot more functionality on the AI side. So I would say there's some homework that needs to be done there instead of immediately saying you're in tier 1, get off of it, move to tier 2. Right, I don't know if that's the message that we're trying to give here. I think the message is here. Check these other boxes, right? Review these other things that you need to do for your analysis first, and then determine which proper, correct tier 2 solution would be the best fit for you.
What do we think about cost here? Because in that upper tier 2 list, those are some wildly different priced products there. I think you had Epicor, Kinetic, IFS Cloud. Did you have Dynamics in there?
Yeah, Dynamics SCM. Well, they've actually put Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance separately, and then Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. So,
okay,
FNSCM.
But some wildly different pricing options there. Yeah, I think a little bit of extra nuance in this day and age is also cloud and the cloud subscription costs as well, which I think for some makes it a bit of an uplift and others not so much. So that is a new bit of nuance to consider in all of this as well.
When we were talking about that, I'm thinking of you guys know me, I love an analogy. If I can get one in there, I'm thinking about if you're buying a car, right? It might be you've got a 7-seater SUV for the kids. That's what you needed back then. They've moved out. You've downsized your house. Now you've got a car that you're paying 7 seats worth of fuel for. It doesn't fit in the garage anymore. You've got all of these features you don't need anymore. You wouldn't just go, yeah, regardless, SUV, I need another huge car with loads of seats, right? You would look at what is available nowadays. If you bought that 10, 15 years ago and you're looking for a new car, one, you're going to, just like ERP, you're going to be surprised with how much is now standard. You might have had that old 15-year-old SUV that you customized by putting in a CD player, right? You go, well, that's standard now. Actually, it's not, is it? Even the CD, we've gone past CDs. But
I was going to say
what I
CD.
mean,
What is that? What is that, Peter? I haven't heard of that. CDs. I haven't heard of that before.
But you'd be looking for the features that you're kind of used to. Like, where's the handle for the window gone? Like, well, now it's just a button. Now it's not even a button, right? It's just called aircon. So it's the same kind of thing when you're looking for a new car. You should look at other offerings. It also works the other way around, right? We've only spoken about it coming to us. Like, what's the fit? Let's look at the market and let's look at tier 1, tier 2 ERP. Look at the features. Does that fit my business? How much am I utilizing of those features of those ERP? What about the other way around? And Nirav, you said this earlier around, the business only had 5 people looking at F&O SCM. What about us feeding it, right? A huge tier 1 ERP, oftentimes the right business for that would have huge teams of people, full departments of people, feeding it information, updating records, maintaining master data. When you're a business that actually would be much better on Acumatica, that kind of team often are small. You don't have the resource to be able to feed your ERP with good data, with complete data, have time to make sure the master data is still current and correct. So are there any kind of telltale signs, Nirav, when you're going out there? Obvious one is, how big is your business, right? If there's only 5 people, you're not going to be looking at SAP.
Yeah.
But are you thinking about what this team now will have to do to feed the ERP data rather than what the ERP can do for them?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it both ways, because I think data is always changing, right? The way you work with your vendors, the way you work with your customers, your logistic company, new improvements you do internal to the business, data is constantly changing. I don't think there's such thing as saying set it and forget it when it comes to data, right, Peter? So I think that piece of it is status quo, regardless of what system you're in, the maintenance of that data. Now, there could be some automations and things, and maybe some predictive analysis that could run with some newer ERPs out there that could look at trends and velocities and make decisions for you through AI. But I think that maintenance piece stays the same. However, the other piece of it, how you could take that data and use that data for your benefit, understand better gaps in your business, blind spots, where business is changing, where you need to get rid of a division potentially, right? That's all things I think the way the newer ERPs, even tier 2 ERPs here do that, and they do that really well, right? I think you're replacing data. I think you're replacing kind of that, I would say, more of an archaic role a little bit of data management with like a true data analyst of that information to, make better decisions. And we've talked about this from day one. If that data just stays on the shelf, it's collecting dust, right? Like anything else at a grocery store, it's going to expire. You're not going to be able to take advantage of it. You need to have that data be live, and it has to be actionable really fast as soon as you start recording it in your ERP system. So that's where I think there's a crossover. I feel like where tier 1 systems had more of that, kind of just straight data, data management or data entry kind of person making updates, where now you have predictive analysis, you have AI, and then you have data analysts, where you could actually bring that data to life. I did come across something here that I want to talk about. There are some linear paths when it comes to looking at tier 1 and tier 2. Right. And some of the examples that I was able to find through some experience and some stuff that I checked on the internet, what I call crossover paths, where if you're on, let's say, QAD or IFS, Acumatica is the right approach for you. Right. If you're on Epic or Kinetic, maybe Business Central is the right approach for you based on the Business Central functionalities. If you're on SAP ECC, right, moving to Acumatica or Business Central might be the right option, or maybe even SAP One. Now, SAP has a mid-tier solution called SAP One, right? JD Edwards. I've taken customers off of JD Edwards and moved them into Business Central, right? And there's another option to also go into NetSuite. So there are some kind of linear paths here that you could research and follow. Like if I wanted to get off my tier 1 system, what is the right next system for me to be on, and start looking at that and determine if that's the right place for you to land. So maybe that reduces your research a little bit. So I wanted to mention that because this is becoming more and more common, right, out there, and how people are thinking about, do I need to be on this tier one solution that we're on that still has some green letters, and I have to print it on dot matrix printers and things like that. So,
So do you think there's any, because I think this would be quite a logical thought process. Do you think there's any good reasoning behind sticking with the same type of provider, but going for one of their lower tier products? So you're on F&O, you could think, well, obviously, let's go to Business Central, or you could be on JD Edwards and think, well, let's stay with an Oracle, let's go to NetSuite. Is there ever any good argument for that in and of itself, or should the other options within that tier kind of get a similar look in? I know my own opinion, but what's yours?
Yeah, I think that's a logical place to start, to say, is there a clean path? From my experience, there's not. It's two totally completely different database structures, architectures, strengths and weaknesses at the end of the day. An example here is, in our world, is companies that try to go off of Dynamics GP, because that's being sunsetted, right, 2029, and decide, hey, we should automatically go to Business Central. I don't know about that. I don't think that's a clear kind of migration. GP was very strong in projects. It had a lot of like project specific functionality. It did really good things in terms of that functionality. Business Central, not so much. It's getting there, but it's not a path that you could just say one-to-one. There's a big migration project that happens between that. So I would say no in this, for your question, Emily. I think it's worth looking at other solutions outside of your publisher that offer other solutions out there, because so much has changed that you would just be doing a disservice, I feel like, if you don't give a good run at different solutions to see how closely they'll match your business.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's a solid option, but it's not inherently easier than any other option.
Yeah.
The risk is thinking that it is the same, going into it and going, well, it's just, same. There won't be any issue. There will be. We've even seen it, Nirav, haven't we? From someone going from an on-prem version of it to on cloud. The database structure is different. You do not have, oftentimes, you do not have direct SQL access to the databases. Suddenly, all of your Power BI reporting or Jet reporting is broken.
Exactly.
Tables are different. Columns are different. Calculated columns that were being done by the on-prem ERP isn't done in the cloud now. It ends up breaking everything. You go, BC to BC, fine. Or 2018 to BC is fine.
Yeah, no, it's not. I look at it this way. Here's an analogy. Peter, you love analogies here. I'm not very good at golf. I think I am. So just because I shoot, bad on one golf course doesn't mean I'm going to be great on another golf course. I'm probably still going to be bad. So, you kind of have to look at it that way. You have to give yourself a shot here and research as much as you can. Not where there's information paralysis, where you research so much and you're like, oh, I don't want to move anywhere. I just want to stay in my own system, right? That's another thing too. A lot of, I see customers, they research the heck out of the market, and in their head, all of a sudden they have this perfect ERP system that doesn't exist. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and stay where I'm at. So you kind of have to find the best fit, unless you're going to, build your own, which I highly suggest against any company doing that. Don't build your own ERP system, but, use something that will go ahead and get you at least 80% there. And then look at the third-party ISVs to help bridge those gaps that you have. So now you have a complete solution. You're not paying, the tier one price tag at the end of the day, right? You're paying, something to actually use. You're going to use all parts of the system.
My advice to you then would be, maybe you need to downsize to pitch and putt. Or,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Obviously, a full 18 is just too big for you. It's not the right fit. You're not feeding it the right score.
That's not enough clowns and dinosaurs.
I love spending the extra money, Peter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas you could just go down to a crazy golf, like $5 around.
Yeah, exactly. I should do that, but I just love spending the extra at the end of the year. It just looks so flashy on my P&L.
All right, here's another one that I thought was quite interesting when I was thinking about this. And I always think back to this. When we come to ERP migration, and we want to have a look at as many new ERPs as we can. It's been 10 or 15 years since our last time that we were looking at what's available. We're kind of going to be looking at everything. We don't know what tier 1 and tier 2 means. we're just looking at SAP. And then tomorrow we're looking at Acumatica. We're just seeing them both as an ERP, right? I always think back. My issue through a recent migration from Nav to Acumatica, I was so pissed the amount of times that I heard people saying, "Well, yeah, well, here's my issues with Nav. It doesn't do this and it doesn't do that." And I'm sitting there going, "It does. It absolutely does do that. It has that feature. You've just never used it." Now, it's easy to blame the end users and go, "Well, you're not curious enough. You're not bothering to look. You're too lazy to go and look at if this feature exists." I still stand by that. There is a part of that. But also, I don't think you can necessarily always blame the end users, because oftentimes with churn of people, a lot of the training on ERP is done from one person to another, from one end user to another, not often by the guides and the instruction and the tuition available from the ERP vendor themselves. So you end up not remembering or losing sight of some of the features that are in there, because no one remembers like all of these kind of features. Everyone always remembers the limitations, right? They're like, well, someone was told in 2014 it doesn't do this, so we have this Excel. They were told incorrectly because the person in 2011 didn't tell them about this feature. So you end up with feature loss, just as people, forget some features but just remember the limitations. So I think back to that because, people go, "Oh, it'd be great if the new ERP would have this and would have that." And it's easy then to go and have a look at a huge tier 1 ERP and go, "Holy shit, it's got all of these things." Not realizing that one, your old system had that, and two, something like Acumatica probably has that as well. So I think that's one aspect that could push people to think they need a bigger ERP. They see bigger ERP, more features. They don't actually think, my current ERP, we've slowly stopped using some of the features because of people forgetting, because of people jamming in, Mike's Excel spreadsheet he built in 2013.
I totally agree. And in the same boat, I've been thinking about the same thing, but, these overly customized old ERPs. I've certainly encountered it with perfectly good ERP systems. I can remember a particular example with QAD, and everybody hated it. Nobody trusted the data. I think everything was just being done in Excel. There's nothing wrong with QAD. I think even one of them had a family member who was a QAD consultant. So kind of had this knowledge like, isn't it supposed to be good? Isn't it supposed to be able to do all of this? Why doesn't our version do it? Well, for exactly the reasons Pete just said, and also because, we've jammed in all of these customizations when we didn't really need to, maybe misguided by an implementation partner or something in the past.
Yeah, 80% of Excel spreadsheets have errors, right? We know that, Peter. In one of our first episodes, we talked about this. So, it's once the confidence starts losing, everyone's crutch is going to be Excel at the end of the day. And confidence just doesn't have to be with data. And I think in the system, I think it could be that there's a true barrier with the ERP system. It's just too many clicks. It's just difficult to add data. Maybe it's hard to navigate through the firewalls or wherever you're trying to access the ERP from, right? The tier 1s, you have to go through VPNs and they're on-premise most likely. And it just becomes a barrier to them doing their day-to-day job. So Excel becomes a crutch, and then that just continues on forever and ever and ever and ever. And then the ERP just starts getting outdated.
Funnily enough, I recently had it last week, I think it was, with Acumatica. This is how quickly it can happen. And maybe you need kind of an ERP owner or someone that's the ERP expert within the business. Because I had it last week with a customer where I was suggesting that they look at automation schedules in Acumatica, where instead of manually having to print to screen a sales order acknowledgement, type in the email addresses of who they want to send it to, and then click the send button, we could just automate it on an automation schedule. Every 5 p.m., any new order that's gone on that day, it pings out the sales order acknowledgements. Obviously, that's like the same as just clicking the email button, right? You put an automation schedule on that email button. And I said, obviously, you need to make sure that your customer records have on the mailing and printing tab, right, has a contact assigned as a recipient to that particular mailing profile or email template. They came back when, oh yeah, well, obviously we can't use that because that email function can only send to one recipient. No, it can't. You can have lots of people in the to address. You can put them in a CC, the BCC. You can even select whether they get it in PDF or HTML or Excel format. Like, where did this come from? Someone else told me that. This company's only been on Acumatica for about a year, right? And it's like, now it's already, it can't do this, it can't do that. Where did that actually come from? And it's easy to blame the person, right? And go, well, you weren't curious enough. You didn't bother looking. You didn't go to the help section to see how to set up such a thing. But if someone else has told them, it's this like folklore around what your ERP can do functionally. That can end up over time compounding, going up to the stakeholders and going, oh yeah, well, my company's moaning about all of these features they need and they would love to have, but their current ERP system doesn't do that. We're going to have to look at bigger. We're going to have to go, on the other end of this. Like, where does this come from? This is, I'm trying to not make this just
I can picture you shaking them.
Oh, I wish I was. And it's just like, here's a great automation you could do. You just need to change and, just make good master data, right? Just make sure. And it's like, no, it can't do that. Well, one, I got pissed off. You're telling me, the guy that loves that, lives and breathes Acumatica, can't do it. But also, it's like, where does this weird folklore come from? And it's these small bits of made up limitations of your current system that can easily translate to, we need something bigger than we've got. And it's not always that case.
I've got a question about the project itself. Am I jumping ahead? Do we have more on the lead up to the project?
No, it's just otherwise it's going to be me moaning about people underutilizing their modern ERP.
Slowly putting on more Acumatica memorabilia. Where's your hat? And I think that's an Acumatica t-shirt, isn't it? I recognize the color.
Is, yeah. That's hilarious.
Anyway, so my question, I don't think I've ever been involved in a downgrade project using the definition of downgrade that we've stated for this episode. So is there anything different, anything to look out for in a downgrade project versus a normal one?
I would say, I think in my eyes, this is a reevaluation of your processes and not taking what you're currently doing, because a lot of that could be based off of functionality or module constraints, but really reevaluating your processes and doing a implementation of those revised processes. Maybe not so much data in this case, because a new implementation, it's data and process. I think data should be fairly clean if you're coming from an ERP system, unless you're using Excel as a crutch everywhere in the system. Then I think it's a data migration as well, data implementation. But assuming that you're open to tier 2 functionality is to reevaluate your processes and implement those maybe more updated pieces of the business correctly, seamlessly, a lot more efficient in a tier 2 ERP implementation. Because they're coming off of an ERP system. So they, AR, AP, usually those things don't get touched. Those are good across the board, right? It doesn't matter which ERP system you're using. But it's a lot more having to do with inventory control, warehousing, manufacturing, shipping, receiving, product data management, integrations with like CAD systems, CRM, right? All the really what I call, really detailed information that helps many people in the organization do their jobs is what you really want to focus in on to get them on board, where we reevaluate the processes and it's much easier in the next system that you're bringing on.
I could imagine there's functionality also that maybe they currently have, or like they know that they should have, but it's not working now for whatever reason. And actually in the project, we could actually just get rid of that. Do we really need that? I can think of an example that I've experienced actually, where they had some kind of like a counter on the machines that would feed into the ERP, but they weren't doing anything with that data. And they didn't have any plans to do anything with that data. So that really doesn't need to go into phase 1 of a go live of a project, but that's not something really the IT team can say. It's a business process to reevaluate.
I would also say, whether you're downgrading or moving on to something bigger, the same core principles apply in data migration. Don't just think, we're moving from this gargantuan SAP that's just full of crap. We'll take what we need and just put that in the new ERP, right? You still need to do good master data management, have a proper, it's another reset. Even though you're going to something slimmer does mean better, right? But still, you need to do the data cleansing. You need to think about what you are taking with you and what you're not, what now belongs into historical data for data retention purposes, regardless of you moving, onto whatever ERP you happen to be moving onto. It's still an opportunity to reset. One of the things I think you should do is get a list of features of your one and go through and go, do I use that? Do I use that? One, you're probably going to stumble upon some and you go, oh, I didn't know it did that. Oh, that's funny. Because of what I said, folklore and then forgetting about some of the features. And also, you're going to find out from a utilization point of view, aren't you? Going to, my license, I'm paying every year to have this feature. Don't use it. I don't use that. Don't use that. Don't use that. Then you're going to have kind of a list. Maybe you should split that list and say, here's the things that we are using. Here's a list of, man, if I only knew that it had that feature, we could get rid of a bunch of manual workarounds. And then some that's like kill. Then go to, as Nirav, you said earlier, go straight towards Acumatica and have a look. Go, it does all these. It doesn't do this one. Let's have a look. Is there a third-party solution I can bolt on? Because you could be on the smallest ERP. There's no company out there using 100% of all of the features of every module. There's always going to be some that you don't. So you want to limit that because you're paying for every single one. It doesn't matter if you're on the smallest resource of Acumatica and you're just on a manufacturing edition. If you're not using ECNs, ECOs for engineering change management stuff, you are paying for it. So if you can limit the amount of stuff that you're not using, but you're paying for, then that's only going to be a win, right?
Absolutely. Overselling software is a big thing in the industry where a lot of customers get sold a 5-year kind of module plan when they need maybe, much less than that for year one. So, I understand the excitement of buying what a 5-year plan looks like, but you kind of have to scale that back and say, what is year one? What do I need for year one to run my business? And it's good to know that I could bring these other modules on in 5 years as my business grows or goes a different direction or whatnot. Yeah. But it's a really important concept to understand.
Yep. I think some of the caveats then, if we've got someone out there that is sitting on this gargantuan thing, they're like, holy shit, we're paying $500,000 a year for this, and we're using 10% of it. If there are people out there and they're now thinking, maybe I need to have a look at what BC or Acumatica can do, or even Odoo or something like that. A few caveats, if you're like, right, yep, cool, we're going to do that. Either way, it's still an ERP migration. So don't think as much as it is a downgrade, we can do this project on fewer people. You won't. You're just going to end up with the same people just doing more stuff. And if you have fewer people, you're going to risk a successful go live. And also, it'll be simpler. We don't need to spend as much time doing discovery. No, you absolutely do. You still need to be running it as a serious migration project, even though you're going to a smaller ERP.
Exactly.
Any closing thoughts, or who wants to summarize what we've spoken about?
Nirav's our expert, so I think it's for you to summarize.
I think this conversation needs to be on every table. Customers are using a tier 1 software right now. You would be doing a disservice if it's not a point of decision making. Here, you will find a lot of tier 2 solutions could do the job and possibly in many cases better than maybe even what a tier 1 could do without less confusion and headaches and just overcomplication of your processes and customizations. Right. And I know this because we deal in the tier 2 space often. You cannot make the jump from tier 1 to tier 3. We know that, right? There is still clear boundaries between what QuickBooks could do and what SAP could do, even obviously for tier 2 for that matter. But, the line's becoming blurred between tier 1, tier 2. A lot of industry specific software out there. A lot of people in your organization, if you kind of have New York folks, then the first time you did the implementation have better experience in technology, better experience in software, right? Have maybe come from specific software that may benefit your business. Put all that on the table. So you don't have to live with what you have right now, if you're a tier 1 customer, it's worth exploring out there, because there is a slew of other solutions out there that, in my opinion, are worthy of conversation.
Also, I think people should be mindful of, if you do move to a smaller ERP, yes, it's easy to go, oh, well, license costs are going to be cheaper. But it's more than that. You said it at the start of this, typically a smaller ERP gives you more flexibility. You're almost like buying a shorter feedback loop, right? When we talk about customizations and stuff, trying to customize a huge enterprise level SAP style ERP is often not just more expensive, but also much, much longer as well. So it's not just you're buying cheaper software, you're buying the flexibility. You can own more. You've got a shorter feedback loop. You can easily monitor these kind of things. I think that's a big win as well.
Yeah, what we didn't talk about was these big names. You're such a small fish in an ocean to them. It's really inaccessible in terms of being listened to at all. That's not to say with all smaller ones you're just going to be able to call up the CEO, but if I look at Oracle, I struggle to be able to get them to do my renewal and let me pay them more money. They can be really difficult to get hold of, some of these larger companies, whereas the smaller ones, you can go to a trade show, you can go to one of their events, and you can speak to some relatively high up people. So if you're trying to get some kind of influence, be listened to, you're having a problem, in my experience, a greater chance that you'll feel that they care.
Mm-hmm.
Can't compare them all directly because I don't know, but certainly the feeling to me as the customer is that I can get through much better to the smaller players in the game.
Yep.
I think that kind of does it. So should you downgrade? Well, again, it's not a clear-cut thing, but I think you should definitely do some of the things that we said. Go and measure your current ERP utilization, print out the list of features, mark every single one, and also look at what's offered out there. I think it surprised a lot of people, some of the native functionality that you see in smaller ERP offering. Bigger doesn't always equal better. It's how you use it. With that said, if it turns out that you do need to move, reach out to us for advice. Always look at the ABCs of ERP and beyond, heading towards 90 episodes now. So we have a backlog, a wealth of information from everything with change management, how you look at what's out there, how you even run such a project, whether this is your first episode or if you're a regular listener. Do make sure that you like and subscribe wherever you find the show. The show is on Spotify, Apple. We put the video up on YouTube as well. We don't do any adverts. We're not sponsored. We're certainly not ever going to be sponsored by Starlink or
QuickBooks.
Non-ERP. trying to not mention them again. Otherwise, look, we know AI's there. It's probably scraping transcripts. If we continually say QuickBooks, it's going to start advertising QuickBooks, and that's definitely not what we want. But either way, yes, make sure you like and subscribe. Nirav's team can help you if you are looking at a downgrade. Are you stuck on an archaic, huge ERP? Then reach out to him at addcirruserp.com. They do exactly this. He's not paid me to say that yet. 4 seasons in, and the invoice is way overdue.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
But with that said, thank you, both of you. Catch you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. See you then.
Peter and arrive with Emily on the scene.